Hey guys, I hope you are doing well. Today I want us to look at geography and the Great Gatsby. One thing that's really cool about novels and what authors are able to do is they're oftentimes able to take geography, a place in space, and they allow that geography to sometimes become its own character, but also to suggest something else. They become a symbol, they become a metaphor for something. And so today I want us to look at the geography of the Great Gatsby and what that tells us about this novel. Fitzgerald does this really great job of placing this novel in a particular place, placing it inside of New York and Long Island, and allowing us to understand classes of people, even within a particular class, like a high class, like the levels of that class, and allowing us to see how they interact with each other. And it suggests to the larger themes. We've talked about how one of the themes in The Great Gatsby is the American dream. And if you continue to read ahead, or if you are coming back to this video, Jake Gatsby tries to pursue this idea of the American dream, pulling himself up by his own bootstraps. But at the beginning of chapter 2, we begin to see kind of that long game of Fitzgerald showing us the idea of this American dream. So the beginning of chapter 2, in chapter 1, we meet Nick, we kind of meet Gatsby, we meet Tom and Daisy, and they're living on these peninsulas in Long Island called West and East Egg. And then in between them, or to the south of them, in between them, is the Valley of Ashes. And we'll see at the end of this novel that there's even kind of a broader sense of geography as well. But for now, I want us to look at these three places in geography with each other and how we can understand the novel through geography. Pause this video right now. I'll give you a couple minutes to read it, or I guess if you pause it, you don't need a couple minutes. I'm not going to be silent forever. Pause the video, read the first 2 pages of chapter 2. Okay, we're back. There's a couple things that I want to show you that are really cool. I'm going to read this first paragraph. About halfway between West Egg and New York, the motor road hastily joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile, so as to shrink away from a certain desolate area of land. This is a valley of ashes, a fantastic farm, where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the form of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally, with the transcendent effort of men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air, occasionally a line of gray cars crawls along an invisible track, gives out a ghastly creak, and comes to rest. And immediately the ash-gray men swarm up with laden spades and stir up an impenetrable cloud which screens their obscure operations from your sight. And then it continues to go on. We have the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, some kind of old advertisement for an optometrist or an oculist that is fading away. And then we have the Valley of Ashes again is bounded on one side by a small foul river when the drawbridge is up to let barges through. The passengers on waiting cars can stare at the dismal scene for as long as half an hour. There's always a halt there for at least a minute, and it was because of this that I first met Tom Buchanan's mistress. So there's a couple things I want us to look at. The first thing is, what are West and East Egg? Are they literally eggs? And then what is this Valley of Ashes? The first thing, though, is that Fitzgerald is pulling from another source. He's pulling from a poem from T.S. Eliot called The Wasteland. And he's using that idea of the wasteland, kind of this broken down, this desolate area. And he's showing us something through the imagery within this geography. The Wasteland was a poem that T.S. Eliot wrote that was very popular. It was very good. It's very cynical, although I think there's some places of hope inside of it that show us the brokenness of the modern world. If you remember from our video, the introduction to The Lost Generation, Writers in the Lost Generation are responding to the brokenness of their worlds. Fitzgerald, in this case, is borrowing from images and language from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland to show this brokenness. Let's see if I can find a good passage. This comes from part 1 in The Wasteland. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge, so many. I had not thought death had undone so many. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet. You can see or hear that brokenness, and in my mind, I see all these people standing in line, waiting to go somewhere. But where are they really going? What is it really for? That image that Fitzgerald is borrowing from T.S. Eliot, we see that in the first 4 paragraphs of this. So what does this look like? Why does this matter for us? Why is Fitzgerald placing this image in the second chapter of his book? This is a near perfect book, and one of the reasons why it's near perfect, I'll even say perfect, why it's perfect, is the pacing of the story. How Fitzgerald decides to tell this story. Each chapter is on purpose, and it's less than 200 pages. Each chapter has a pacing with action that is slowly unveiling this story. I imagine it's like a ball of yarn, right? And so you pull this yarn, and there's a knot for each section, right? And so as you're pulling this knot from each section, you begin to see that it's unraveling, how the story is coming together. So this is Google Maps. We have the East Coast and we have the West Coast. At the end of the novel, Nick says that this is a story really of East Coast society and Midwest society, and how one cannot enter into another society. So it's a commentary on that. Well, if we go a little bit closer, and we'll talk about that towards when we get to the end of the novel, as we go a little closer, we have New York City. Let me see if I can kind of get this. We have New York City there, and then we have these peninsulas, and then we have this area right here. If we go a little bit further into, if I can erase this. I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to. Oh, interesting. Okay, so if we go a little bit further, we have these 2 peninsulas. And these are the peninsulas that, they're not called East and West Egg in real life, but Fitzgerald is referring to these peninsulas as a geography. So Tom and Daisy live in East Egg, which is right here. And Gatsby and Nick live in West Egg right here. If you were to go a little bit closer, and you were to look at, if you were a little bit closer and to look at these 2 areas, you could see that this is pretty illustrious. This is a pretty awesome area. I look at these and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is like where I imagine Beyonce would live. And I like to zoom in here to like look at houses that I will never be able to afford in my lifetime at all. And so there's a lot of opulence, right? If you are watching this for some reason and you own this house, congratulations, having an awesome house. But I imagine that Fitzgerald is thinking about these 2 peninsulas, and he's using the East Egg and the West Egg as senses of understanding these 2 places of geography. East Egg is, West Egg is here. West Egg is like old money, and East Egg is new money. And so Gatsby is unable to enter into that old money. He's always on the outside of it. But Tom comes from old money. And so I imagine that Gatsby is kind of sitting on one of these docks, and he's looking across the bay at that green light where Daisy and Tom is. And he's pining. Everything he does in this story is for Daisy, but there's a chasm, right? There's a bay of water that he's unable to reach. He's unable to cross, to swim across, to float over. And he desperately tries to get to the other side. Well, as you continue to read, we'll see what Gatsby does, how he tries to get to the other side and never does it at all. He's pining after that green light. Well, okay, we have West Egg and we have East Egg, right? I'll circle those again so we remember them. West Egg and East Egg. These are symbols of new money and old money. New money can't get into old money because, according to Fitzgerald, the prejudice of that old money. And then we have New York City, right? And we know New York City, right? I dream in New York. Everything that's accompanied with New York City. Well, to go from East Egg or West Egg, to go from those all the way to New York, you have to cross through the Valley of Ashes, and it's this spot, right? The Valley of Ashes, Queens, Brooklyn, things that are south of these peninsulas. You have to drive through these working class areas to get to the other side. And notice what's on the foundation of East and West Egg, both of these peninsulas that have money. They're built on the foundation of the working class. They're built on the foundation of the Valley of Ashes. So take all of these things in, right? This image of these people that are pining away to search after something. Right after this, we see that Tom introduces Nick to his mistress, and then his mistress Myrtle, terrible name, and then Myrtle's husband wants to get out of the Valley of Ashes. And all of this is in terms of Nick's impression, right? He's allowing this to be impressed upon him and this experience. So think about the geography, these places in space, and how these places in space are helping us to understand the novel as a whole. Happy reading. I hope you guys are enjoying the novel. I look forward to talking to you guys soon.